Hi, I'm Joe Genders, the president of Raucous Blum Computer Consulting. Today, I'm going to be covering how we can use Sage Operations Management software for projects, either internal projects for your company or projects for your customers. The functionality that I'll be covering today can also apply to other aspects of your business. The nature of projects is that they're unique and custom, and a lot of times can be kind of a one-off type of thing. The scheduling module won't necessarily work because many times projects have things going on concurrently, and sometimes the next task in a project can't really start until prior task is done. But we can manually schedule projects, and we'll be taking a look at that. As I already mentioned, a lot of times in projects, there's tasks that need to be performed, and not necessarily everything is considered an operation. Projects can use resources that are normally used for production, such as equipment and employees. An important thing with projects is that you can know the status and manage them to help keep things on track. And of course, we need to be able to track and analyze the costs related to a project. Here's the agenda. I'm going to go over some examples of internal projects, examples of customer-related projects. We'll cover functionality that's useful for projects, and then I'll get into some demonstrations of a customer installation project and then an internal research and development project. Examples of internal projects are research and development. And in that case, we want to be able to track all the costs and compile them, but then have it also get expensed to our research and development account on the GL. In that case, we can set up the R&D projects to be a work in process bypass so that the work ticket helps us manage it and capture all the costs and be able to analyze the costs, but the costs don't sit on the balance sheet and work in process. They'll get expensed as soon as they're recorded. Another type of internal projects are fixed asset capitalization. This is a topic I covered at last year's conference, and we do have a recording of that. So things like getting a machinery in place and ready for use, managing the contractors that maybe need to get the foundation set and do the wiring and things like that. And obviously the acquisition of the machinery. Possibly there's also internal labor that goes into that. This will allow you to use a work ticket to capture and track all of those costs and then have a good audit trail for that. You can also think of this as maybe an internal project of tracking non-production time. So if we want to have a better accounting for employees' time that's not related to production, we can create work tickets and activity codes to be able to analyze that. In some cases, people just like to track the hours and know how many hours are being spent on things and not necessarily move the costs around on the income statement. But if you do want to move the costs around on the income statement, that's possible to do too. Once again, it'd be a work in process bypass type work ticket where we use the work ticket to kind of track and analyze the cost, but everything gets expensed right to the income statement. Here's a graphical depiction kind of how that would work. If we do want to move those different costs to different GL expense accounts, we can set up the activity codes to be linked to those related expense accounts. So when the time is recorded, it'll get posted to the work ticket. We'll be able to analyze it there, but then the cost gets expensed right to the GL. If we don't want to move the dollars around on the income statement, we can just track hours and not have costs associated with that. And that way we can analyze the time within the work ticket, but not necessarily see the dollars moving around on the income statement. Some examples of customer related projects could be building a prototype for a customer. There may be some back and forth and things that need to be done pre-production and maybe need to get customer approval and things like that. That can all be incorporated into that. Building some custom tooling for a customer could be considered a project. Once again, there may be some back and forth and refinements that are done, so it's not just like typical manufacturing. You could do a research and development projects for a customer. Really, an engineer to order job many times is like a project because Once again, you're maybe having to get drawings or pictures from the customer, do some design, come back with a proposal, and maybe there's, like I say, some back and forth and some tasks that need to be done, especially pre-production. So that's kind of like a project. Installation of a system is a project. That's on maybe related a little bit almost to the fixed asset capitalization, where you need certain things to be done. Maybe a foundation needs to be poured, equipment needs to be delivered, electrical work needs to be done. So it's more of a progression and a project of series of events that needs to get done. And sometimes large service jobs are more like a project versus a service. I mean, typically service is like shorter one-off calls to fix a certain thing. But when doing a large service of maybe like an entire plant or something, that's more of a project and works out better if it's kind of looked at from that perspective. So I'm going to cover some functionality that's useful for projects. So the work ticket class, this is kind of the big brother to the work tickets that are being created. It has the rules for how the related work tickets will work. The work ticket class code itself is useful for reporting purposes because you can filter that for reporting and dashboards. The work ticket class impacts the postings to the general ledger, including WIP bypass, which allows you to expense it right away and not have it held in WIP. Work ticket class has a scheduling method, and we also have scheduling groups by work ticket class. So if we want to break down the schedule and look at just the projects and not look at everything that's in production, we can make a unique scheduling group for that, and that can be useful. So steps within the work ticket help us organize and manage the project. Some of the uses for steps can be for tasks, such as obtaining customer approval. Maybe you need to obtain a permit, or you need to do a QC test. And maybe there's not necessarily labor that needs to be tracked there, but it is something that needs to be done. Steps can also be phases. So maybe, let's say in a engineer to order situation where we're going to build something and then install it, we could have a pre-production phase where we're planning and maybe getting customer approval for the project. Then we actually have production where we're making it, and then possibly it gets shipped on site and then we install it. We can kind of look at those three different groups as phases. A way that can be broken out in the work ticket is signify different 100 series of steps, which will help us show that, hey, the 100 series is for pre-production, the 200 series of steps is production, and maybe the 300 series is installation. That way we can have multiple steps within each of those phases, but then we also can easily understand what each phase is. Steps can also be used as cost buckets. So if we want to be able to analyze the cost in the project, and we can put different types of expenses in different steps. Maybe materials are on certain steps, or we have a step for subcontract costs, or if we need to do some rentals, we could have a step to capture our rental costs. What also can be useful with that is if we're billing by the different types of costs too, we can also run the billing through that step, which would then match up the cost with the related revenue for that cost. Step status changes can be very helpful in a project. When a status is changed on a step, it date and time stamps it, and also notes what employee made that change. We're able to pick the new status code and enter in a comment related to it. So this helps us see the chronological progression of the project, and then we can also see how much time it takes between the different status changes within the project. For instance, if we maybe send a quote to the customer to be approved, we would see the day that we sent it, and then when it's approved or not approved, we could make that status change. We could see how much of a turnaround there was to get that approval. So you can do calculations on the time it takes between the status changes. So I can give you some KPIs of how much time it takes to accomplish certain things. We can see the current status on dashboards, which allows you to help manage the project, know exactly where all the steps or tasks or operations are at. Within the work ticket, there's a full audit trail of all the changes, which will allow us to analyze the progression. So step 0 is the header step of a work ticket. So a lot of times we can use that, making step statuses changes on that step can kind of tell us where the overall project is. And then on the numbered steps that have all the details for the project, that's where we can have a more detailed status of each step. Within a work ticket, we can also assign a step to 1, 2, or 3 people. So this can help us do some simple scheduling on that project to assign responsibilities and let people know who's responsible for what. Step 0, we can have we can assign a responsibility for the entire project for if there was like a project manager. On the numbered steps, we can assign other employees different tasks, whether it's maybe do an installation or some other activities. So this will allow us then, we can easily make a schedule or a to-do list in Business Insights Explorer that will help everyone understand what they need to do and what the status of everything that they're working on is. We can log time to the steps in the project. So, and we can track it with or without dollars, which is pretty much your preference. As I mentioned too, we can also hold the cost and work in process if that makes sense, or if it doesn't, that can be pushed right to the income statement. Other functionality that might be helpful is within the work ticket class, we can activate user-defined information fields that will allow us to put some custom data in there that there wasn't already a field for. You can issue inventory. We can buy things to order by linking a purchase order, or we can push accounts payable costs into the project. We can do document management. So we're able to link files to it, whether it's pictures or drawings or whatever else it might be. So we can do some document management related to the project. We can create email correspondence templates. So if we need to give the project team or customers an update as to where the project is, we can create these templates that we can then initiate and have them populate with data from that project work ticket. And we can also flag steps as being a change order or a rework. Business Insights Explorer dashboards can be very helpful with projects. They can help us assess the current status of the project and do project management. We can build a project schedule by having activities and assigning employees and having our budgeted actual hours and our start and our end dates. We can build a schedule in Business Insights Explorer very easy. We can make individual employee schedules or task lists. And then we also can analyze our cost of the project. Now I'm going to cover how to set up and use work in process bypass. So this is where we do not want the cost sitting in the work ticket and we want it to be expensed right away. So in work ticket class maintenance, there's a checkbox, bypass WIP posting. So in the work ticket class for that type of project, we would just have to check that box. Then we would need to make unique activity codes for the labor associated with that project. And in there, we would need to make the labor cost account be the appropriate expense account that we want expensed. Here I have an example of it going to research and development expense. If we're purchasing items to a project that we want to have expensed right away with the work in process bypass, we would need to set up miscellaneous items And in that case, the cost of goods sold account would need to be the associated expense account that we'd like it to go to. So if by chance inventory items would be issued to a work ticket and we want that to be a WIP bypass, those items would have to be in their own product line, and the cost of goods sold account of that product line would have to be the appropriate expense account that you want it to go to. So yeah, normal inventory items that have a regular cost of goods sold account, if we issued them into a WIP bypass, it would hit that cost of goods sold account. So we would need to do this. All right, now I'm going to do a demonstration of a large installation or service project for a customer. So this is an example of a customer equipment installation project. So I've already configured this and push some data through it so I can kind of review it in a shorter period of time. So obviously create a sales order to the customer. The ship to address you could use for the job site. And one of the things I'm going to touch on later is doing drop ship purchase orders, where it will use that ship to address from the sales order when we generate the purchase order. So in the line items of the sales order, here we can see the first line is a description of what the project is. And then below that, we can see the different progress billings that are part of this project. We can see we're kind of billing these by phases. So we're billing the equipment after it is manufactured, billing the installation when the installation is done, and then maybe after customer approval, there'll be a final billing. We can see that the item codes are in different colors here. Red means that it's been released and invoiced to the customer. Green means that it's released for billing purposes, but has not been invoiced yet. And if it's at black, that means it's still it's a future billable line that hasn't been released or billed yet. So I'm going to go into the work ticket. I hit my step lookup here, and if you customize the lookup, I mean, you can pull in a lot of information related to this project and kind of see the status of it. I have my step numbers, my activities and descriptions. I can see the start and the end date of the project, of each step in the project. You can see what the status code is and what the comments related to that are. We can also see what date the status change was made on. We can see who's assigned to each of those steps. And I also have my budgeted and actual hours brought into here. So this lookup can essentially be used as a dashboard to help easily see the step status. You can see the different billing steps are kind of milestone billings at the appropriate point in time of the project. I'm going to go into step 0, which is the header step of the project. Here we can see we can use this to assign the project manager to it. So being the header step, they're responsible for the whole project. So we can then see that easily on our dashboards. We can do document management. If I go into my attachments here, maybe I can see how the this equipment installation is supposed to be laid out. If there's a lot of documentation that's going to be attached, you can also create categories, which are like subfolders, help you organize things a little bit better. Here on step 0, I have the start and the end date for the whole project. So if I want to see a real summary dashboard, I can do that by pulling in the step 0 information. And then obviously I can have other dashboards that get into the details of every step. I'm going to go open up the dashboard. So here I have dashboard I called project status summary. And if I go down here, I can see here's the project that I'm doing the demo on. I can see the project manager is Joe. We have a customer PO reference. We know the customer name, description of the project. We have a promise date. We have our start and our end date of the step. And I can also see what the current status of it is. And then on the lower part of the screen here, I can see the details of each step and the status of each step, along with budget versus actual hours and things like that. So that was my header step. My next step I have for shipping equipment. So on my parts tab, here's everything that that we need to ship out to the job site that are actual inventory items. If we have freight costs coming in, that could possibly just be coming in on an accounts payable invoice. So here's where we posted that that invoice into this step related to the equipment. And we can easily drill into that AP invoice if we want to see more information. On the step status tab, I can see all the status changes that were made. We just had one here when we shipped out the equipment. We made note of that. Then in the profit analysis is where we can see our budget versus actual costs for the equipment part of this project. So on step 20, I broke out drop shipments onto its own step. So on the parts tab here, we can see there was one item that we drop shipped. And if I go into the purchase order, so I did receive the invoice against that. You can see here on the ship to address, there's 4 asterisks. So when you launch a purchase order from a work ticket, and if you want it to be a drop ship, you can enter, or if you look up in the ship to address, you pick the 4 asterisks, and then that will pull in the ship to address from the sales order onto the purchase order. So those were the 2 steps basically to get all the equipment out to the customer site. Then after that, we're going to bill the customer for that. So what I did here is used a miscellaneous item for the equipment billing. We can see that this is a chargeable component, so that allowed me to put a price on this. And this has been released and billed to the customer. So that's why it showed up as red on the sales order. So my next step is site preparation. So here we have our estimated start and end date to do that. We can see the technician that I've assigned. Actually, I've assigned 2 technicians here that are responsible for that. On the parts tab, we can have various costs. Maybe we needed to rent a forklift for this project. So here I have an item that's linked to a purchase order for the forklift rental. You could also utilize company equipment possibly on this installation. And there's a way that you can track that and issue it in and out of the work ticket and kind of schedule your own equipment. This is similar to the tooling scheduling demo that I did during last year's user conference. So next step, installation. Once again, we have our dates that were scheduled, have in this case, 3 different employees that are assigned to do that work. Obviously, we can capture their labor time here, and on the labor tab of the step, we'll be able to see all the related labor for this task. And I do have a dashboard that shows the schedule. Let's see, install schedule. All right, so here we can see there's, I have this one grouped by the lead technician, and here it shows our project with this. This is filtering on the installation activity. So we're just able to see that, and then we can see the technicians that we have assigned, what the status is, and then also our budget versus actual hours. So my next step, we have electrical installation, which will actually have this being subcontracted out. We can have the dates that this is supposed to be performed. And then on the parts tab here is where we have a purchase order to request the subcontractor to perform those duties. So my next step after that is actually billing. So once the installation phase is done, we can bill that. On this situation, we have it released for billing, but not yet invoiced. So this line has been released, but not invoiced yet. So we can plainly see that here. All right. Go forward to the next step. So this step is our startup. We have its start and end date scheduled here. Then we have our testing phase with the dates and who it's assigned to. Next step is customer approval. This is more of a task. We do have a date to obtain the approval. And then here, once we get the approval, we can make a status change, and we'd be able to see that audit trail documented here. So we can analyze profitability a couple of ways. I'm going to go back here where I add some costs. If I go to my profit analysis of a step, it's showing me, hey, here's our budget to actual and our variances just on that step. You can see I also have a work ticket summary or a sales order summary. If I click on my work ticket summary, it'll now collapse all steps into one view here, and I can see all my revenue, all my costs, my budget versus actual, and how I'm doing on the project. As I've mentioned, Business Insights Explorer is a great way to track the status of a project. I'm going to go back into that, into my open work ticket view. We had previously looked at the view that showed us the header information. I'm going to go into if I want to see more details, I can go to view and open preview, and this will give me the step detail of each work ticket. I'm going to scroll down here, find the one that we're working on. Here we go. There's my sales order. So here I can see a nice summary of all my steps, what activities being performed, who it's assigned to, our scheduled dates, budgeted hours, actual hours, our variance. I can see the current status code status change date and a comment. I can also see whether there's been any rework or change orders on that. If we want to analyze costs, we can, let's see. Here's a different view that I created where we bring in all of our different cost information, and we can analyze budget actual costs, bring in our revenue, even see gross profit by step, if that makes sense. So now I'm going to do an overview of an internal research and development project. I want to cover setup first. I'm going to go over some of the setup options related to making this research and development project work. First thing is the work ticket class. I have one called research and development. You can just have this, gave it a short description of R&D. We're able to define the scheduling method. I'm going to just do it manually, so I don't have any defined. If I wanted to make a unique R&D scheduling group, I could add that here. But the important thing is over here, I chose to bypass work in process. So this is going to expense everything immediately as soon as it hits the work ticket. So to accommodate that, what we need to do is set up activity codes for R&D that will go to the R&D expense account. So here I have one for developing the concept. I kind of categorized it as an R&D activity, so I can segregate all those easily. And then here with the labor cost account, I have it linked to the R&D expense account. So if we have, if we're going to buy something for an R&D project, we will have to set up a miscellaneous item to that's linked to the appropriate expense account. So here I have a simple one just called R&D for R&D purchase. We do have to use it, allow use in sales order and in purchase order in order to buy things to a work ticket. If I go to the accounts, it's important that the cost of goods sold account is linked to the R&D expense account then. You might want to set up a work ticket template for an R&D job. Maybe there's some common steps that might be done, so that could be helpful. Oops. So here I have my R&D project, and here's the steps that would be involved. Some of these are actual things that need to be done that'll incur time and cost, and other things are just tasks that need to get done as part of that project. So I'm going to review an R&D project that I already put together. So I numbered the sales order differently. So by making it alphanumeric, it makes it look different than our other orders that we'd have in the system. Here I have it also set up a unique customer for the R&D project to make it it's basically the company, but it's the company's R&D project. So in this case, the item code I just used was a wildcard special item that started with an asterisk. So it's really just a placeholder, and then it able to drill into the work ticket. Once again, if I take a look at the the lookup here, I can see a kind of a snapshot of the whole project. So overall, this is fairly similar to how the customer project would work, but I just want to give an example of doing any internal research and development project. We can obviously utilize work tickets for that. And then just a little caveat there is having it be a WIP bypass work ticket class, which will expense all those all the costs at the time they're incurred. And that concludes my presentation.